Good evening.
Good evening.
For those of you I have not met, I'm Troy Roberts, President of the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance, and on behalf of Kent Farmer and the board and the staff of FRA, I want to welcome you here to ED 101 post-recession. Unfortunately, our chairman, Kent Farmer, couldn't be here. He had a business engagement out of town pop up last week. So he asked me to do a quick welcome, which I've just done. And, take that one off. Economic development since the recession is pretty exciting, and it's very interesting. We've become quite busy in the last, I'd say the last 18 months as a state and as a region. What's tougher about it is the timeline to respond to project inquiries is contracted and the competition is tougher. But we're very, very fortunate tonight that we've got two senior leaders of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership here. And ironically, I've known both of these people for about 30 years. We were all in high school back then. By grade, I won't go into all of that. But before I introduce them, we want to make this very open, very casual, very conversational. So instead of there being a hard and fast Q&A, at 7:15, maybe we should shoot to have the social hour start again at 6:45. Sorry. I can see Tim's looking at me really hard back there about the 7:15 stop. 6:45 stop, and then we can go back to chatting. So it'll give us about an hour for the program. But Rob has said that would be a great way to do this in terms of just doing Q&A as we're on topic. Our two speakers, the first is going to be Rob McClintock. Rob is the Vice President for Research for the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, and he is responsible for managing the development of relevant marketing data, resources to support business recruitment, retention, expansion, and international investment objectives into the Commonwealth. He has over 26 years of service at VEDP, and at one point in his career he served as the Economic Development Director in Hanover County, so he also has local experience to go along with it. Rob is a native Virginian. He is a graduate of the University of Richmond. More importantly, he has a master's degree in urban and regional planning from Virginia Tech. I knew I'd get somebody, Bill, to finally pick up on that one. The second part of the tag team is Liz Povar. Liz is the Vice President for Business Expansion for the partnership. She is a graduate of Bluefield College. She had when we first met, she had a 10-year career as the Executive Director of Economic Development for Emporia Greenville County. So she has also local experience. And then she has spent all that time since 1994 progressing at VEDP to the senior leadership position that she is in today. These are two very, very knowledgeable people. There's not a lot in economic development they haven't seen, so they're going to cover it. Ask all the questions you've ever wanted to ask. Rob, I think you're going first.
Mike, thank you all for coming out this evening and being with each other, because you are the team. You are the face of economic development for this region, and it's a vital region. And if you've read the report from the Cardinal team, who are half the people I used to work with most of my life, you can see that the future is very bright. You've got a lot of the right ingredients in place, and it's just putting it together a little bit, stitching it together, and taking it to the next level, because you're really right where you need to be locationally. Liz and I are going to give you a little bit about who we are. I'll give you a little commercial about Virginia Economic Development Partnership. Anybody heard of that group before? I hope somebody. And kind of who we are, what our mission is, and why we are here, and then what our role is and how it interfaces with the real workers in economic development, who are the regional and local folks. Because I will tell you, and I told the team the other day, we were talking about all of this. We can't get anywhere in terms of success at VEDP without you. We don't control one single piece of real estate. We don't set any taxes. We don't control any utilities. We don't make any places. You're the places that we market. So frankly, we have to absorb the assets and understand the assets that you actually bring to the table and hope to project that out globally to the business community. So we are grateful for you, because without you, we have no economic development program in Virginia. Our mission statement, got to have one of those. Sorry, you have to endure this a little bit. I won't give you an org chart, though. It's very straightforward and probably not a heck of a lot different than maybe some of your own mission statements, but it's really about improving the quality of life for the people we represent, the taxpayers, the citizens of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And it's pretty basic. You know, if you consider economic development as maybe from here to here, we've got a good chunk of it. It's a very basic foundational piece, but we don't cover all of it. But what we do cover is business recruitment and attraction. That's probably what most people think of when they think of economic development, is bringing in the new companies into an area or to the state. And we do that, and we do that on a global basis. We also have a business expansion effort to work with the companies that are already here in helping understand who's growing, where some issues are that are preventing that growth, and trying to work hand in glove with you, our partners, to make sure that growth can happen. And then a third plank is sort of a side shoot from that. The same very companies who are in Virginia have a worldwide market for potentially exporting their goods or their services across the world. And, you know, it's been said that roughly 80% of the buying power in the world is outside the United States. So that's a market we're in every day, trying to work with existing companies. If we do all that right, we improve the tax base of Virginia and the communities, and improve sort of the job quotient along with it. It's all about job creation. And why is it all about job creation? Do you know that, you hear a lot, General Assembly's left town, hallelujah, but they spend all their time working on the budget. The general fund budget of the Commonwealth of Virginia, 2/3 of that comes from personal income tax for the people who are working. 2/3 of that budget. Another 20% come from the people who are working, getting payroll, then they're going down the street and they're going to Food Line and Kroger and Kohl's and Walmart and spending those dollars. So 20% of that budget comes from sales tax. And then the rest is other fees. Corporate income tax is only about 4% of the general fund budget. So it's really the head count, the people that really count and really matter. Let's see if this works. Yes. So what do we try to do? We try to be the welcome center, kind of a focal point. Where do you need to go? You need to come to VEDP if you're not familiar with the Commonwealth, and then we will make sure that we get you to the right place, whether it's within state government or within the state generally. We like to think we're that global gateway for Virginia companies to the rest of the world, and we have an apparatus I just mentioned for export opportunities. We're an ally for you and each other, as I mentioned before. And if we do it right, as it relates to the budget, we are one of the few places that actually brings revenue into the Commonwealth of Virginia. And why do we do that? So we can make this an attractive, livable, nice lifestyle community for our folks to grow up in. Because that's really what it's all about. So it's the education, the public services, the parks, all of that create the Virginia that we know and that we love. And I'll tell you, we'll never be known as the biggest gun when it comes to economic development incentives. Everybody's heard the arguments, pro and con, about incentives. Virginia is a AAA bond-rated state. There are not many of those. We are very prudent, but we don't have the largest tool chest, so we have to extract more poundage out of the shekels they give us than other states. And we do that through a pretty rigorous return on investment model where we can account for our success basically at a 9-to-1 ratio. For every dollar of state incentive funds that goes into a package, on average, we're getting $9 back. Well, that's doing a whole lot better than in my bank account right now and some of the other. So that's a really good investment. And I just want you to know that we're really trying to partner with you to make those limited dollars get as much mileage as possible. How are we governed? In the mid-90s, we were set up as an authority by the Commonwealth of Virginia under the Allen administration, time-wise, to make as best as possible the business of economic development as apolitical as we can get it. You're always going to have that around the fringes, but to make the business of economic development run like a business. And that's when we started looking at return on investment and the dollars that we're given. If we need to make a change, every one of us on the staff, if you don't like my speech, tell my boss, and I'm an at-will employee, and they don't have to go through a big rigmarole to get rid of me. That's a pretty quick thing. So if I really screw up tonight, I'm trusting you. But we can move quickly. First day we were an authority, we were able to buy a color copier. Then, it sounds like a little thing, but we had to be on the state contract in years past. We can move somewhat nimbly that way. But we are accountable. We have a board of directors, and it's a big one. It's bigger than some of your boards of supervisors. We've got 24 members. 2/3 of them are appointed by the governor. 1/3 of those are appointed by the House and the Senate of the General Assembly. So each of those branches has a stake in the game, and they're on staggered terms so that no one governor or one General Assembly session can pack the whole board. So you got continuity. And in the statute, they have really one main duty, and that's to hire my boss or to relieve my boss if we're not doing the right thing. They are very engaged. By the way, my boss's name is Martin Briley. He's a lifelong economic developer, from native of Virginia. I think he was just up the road from you guys for about 15 years in Prince William County. Did all the Board of Supervisors meetings, local budgets, all that stuff. We understand what it's like to go before boards and councils, planning commission, BZAs, and all of that. So we've been there, live it. We also, and this is the cool thing, we have direct linkage to the administration, the executive branch, on our board. You can almost have a cabinet meeting at our board meeting. We've got Secretary of Finance, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Technology. Karen Jackson did an event for Stafford recently. I'm looking for you, Tim. You can't find it. There you are. And we also have the Secretary of Commerce and Trade on there. We have the Chancellor of the Community College System and the Lieutenant Governor. So on a daily basis, we have interaction, and particularly with Secretary of Commerce and Trade, on Mondays, the incentive packages that you communities bring us, my boss and I will go through the list each week of what we're recommending to put on the table for a proposal. So they are very quick, they're responsive, and it's really been a delight to work with them. Now, what I'm really supposed to talk about is a little bit of the market, kind of give you a flavor of what we're seeing. And like I said, we're all accountable. And one of the measures we're accounted on at VEDP is how we're doing on job creation, job announcements, and capital investment. Tried and true. And actually, this is calendar year 2014 data. I just want to give you a sense of what that looked like and some of the trends that kind of came out of that. Number one, it was a pretty strong year for job creation, over 21,000 jobs. Now, what kind of jobs are we talking about? We go after what we like to call basic sector employment. Those businesses that bring new employment into a region or the state. From that generates other activity, which could be often referred to as the multiplier effect or the indirect or spin-off jobs. So if we do our job right, it's the manufacturing operations, corporate headquarters, research and development facilities, multi-state retail distribution centers, things like that. What we don't do, at VEDP at least, is focus on the retail operations, personal services, and things like that. So my analogy is usually Walmart. We typically would not get involved with the site location of the supercenter down the street. We would get involved with the location of the multiple state retail distribution center that serves 5 or 6 states, and we do that. I think we've got 4 Walmart centers, for example, in the Commonwealth in different places. I just want to kind of center that for you. Strong job growth, the strongest year we've had since 2011. And in capital investment, which putting real money in the ground in facilities and equipment, we really reached $5.5 billion this past year, which was the biggest number we've ever had. Now, I will fess up. We had one project. It kind of skews that. But it was a really cool project in Chesterfield County, a manufacturing operation coming from China, setting up, took an 800-acre park in southern Chesterfield County, and they're beginning to move towards development in the paper business. That was 2,000 jobs and $2 billion alone. So that does a little bit skew, so I wanted to point that out. But even so, without that, it would have been the 5th highest capital investment year on record anyway. So we felt like, you know, we're beginning now maybe to get some traction coming out of that terrible, terrible recession that we held. Now, whether it's the Commonwealth of Virginia or Spotsylvania County, King George County, any of yours, or the region, the bedrock of economy are the folks who are already here. And you'll see the existing business expansions that we had last year literally represented 2/3 of the jobs. If you're not knocking on the doors of your major employers in your region or in your community, it's time to do so. It's, you know, you're here from the government, you're here to help, but first you're here to listen. And that's what we try to do as we kind of branch out. And Liz will get into that a little bit. Roughly 2/3 of the capital investment, that source of revenue mostly for communities through machinery and tools, real estate, personal property, BPOL or Merchants Capital, whichever one you have comes out of that. The really cool thing that we've seen the last couple of years is a resurgence in manufacturing. I couldn't have made this statement a few years ago, but 45% of the jobs were in manufacturing. And frankly, today, about, I'll get to it, 3/4 of our current pipeline is in manufacturing. The world changed on the energy front with the energy costs, transportation costs. Reshoring is happening, and Virginia is well positioned for that. We're beginning to see that show up on the board. Paper manufacturing, I told you, really sort of dominated because of that really large project, but something else that you're getting into, I mentioned the event with Secretary Jackson up in your region a few months ago with a certified data center. Data centers are hot. I bet you about 90% of you guys in the room have something that looks like this. I was told the other day there's a new server required for every 5 of these that are sold. This is what is moving our economy right now, and it accounted, those data centers in Virginia accounted for over $2 billion of investment. They don't use a lot of people. I think there was 500 employees that went with that $2 billion of capital investment, but it is a rateable item for local governments. It requires substantial infrastructure, but it is indeed what's powering our economy right now. So I want to highlight that. The high wage growth, and this is what your labor studies have said. A lot of the folks who live in your community are taking advantage of the professional services. Many of them get in their cars or on the BRE and head north. It's a lot of talent, and they're getting wages well above the average wage for the state and the region. And that is a really great asset for Virginia because 2/3 of our budget comes from high wage people paying their taxes. The international investment is pretty strong. Again, this time it really was skewed. Without the Tramlin deal in Chesterfield, that number would be a 3% increase. But we are still beginning to see some comeback from where we were. We had 7,000 jobs, I believe it was, in 2008, and we were about 5,000, even without Tramlin, about 3,500 past year. So we're making inroads. We've spent, at the state level, significant resources restocking our lead generation offices in different places around the globe, in Europe and Asia particularly. Okay, just some dimensions around us on the market. I mentioned the market is strong right now. Hopefully, I was looking at your prospect sheet that Curry and the team sent us the other day. It looks like you're beginning to see some steady rebound in your inquiries. We're certainly seeing that. My team, the introverts of VEDP, do all these proposals. Say, here's the deal for Virginia compared to where you're looking, and we put our piece together with the local data. We're up about 74% on those actual deliverables from this time last year, which is remarkable. That's an early indicator of hopefully more prospect visits and deals showing up in the actual returns. But again, manufacturing is very strong, food and beverage. My favorite category, beer is doing particularly well in a number of places. We've had dairy-oriented operations in the valley. You guys had Green Corps, I think, in the last 18 months. We've had Lipton down in Suffolk with a major expansion. So food, technical equipment, industrial equipment, transportation equipment, across the board. So it's very diversified, but it does require ready-to-go sites. So somewhere in this gospel message today is making sure you take your wonderful cluster study and then aligning that with the product, meaning sites and buildings, to make sure that your market opportunities sync up well with what your development community can bring to the market. We'll talk more about that. Luckily, we're seeing a little bit of an uptick finally in the retail distribution centers. Nowhere near where it was before the recession, but at least directionally going the right way. And I think, with McKesson here and some others, and Amazon in our region down in Richmond has really exploded. So I think the consumers are beginning to lighten up and be a little bit more aggressive with their spending, and I would imagine that to continue. We have seen an interesting trend of manufacturers pulling those distribution centers into those same facilities. A lot of integration of both manufacturing and distribution on the same site. So that adds more capital investment as well. Interesting dynamic. 10 years ago, the average deal was just over 100 jobs per deal, 2004, and about $8 million. This past year, and I took Translin out so it wouldn't mess up the averages, took that out, we're down about a third to 67. It had gone a couple of years ago in the recession, 3-4 back, down into the 50s. But still, companies, you're seeing it, I'm sure, in your businesses, are cautious. They're reluctant to add a lot of staff because they have to pay them salaries and benefits, and so they want to make sure they can support that with market opportunity. Conversely, doing more with less, they're spending on equipment, more automation, more with less, more productivity. So those investments are going up and the deal size is scaling down. So that has implications for the size of operations, your planning for land use, transportation, and whatnot around that. So I wanted to point that out as an interesting curve that we're seeing in the marketplace. The heart and soul of VEDP is Liz Pogar, my colleague. And I'll be done.
That's so sweet of him. Thank you, Rob. You can tell that Rob has spent a number of years understanding the data, which I think is the most important thing you at the local and regional level can do. You have to understand your own data first. You have to know within your locality what drives your budget. Where is it coming from? Commercial, residential, industrial, and you have to have a goal and a focus for how you want that to balance. We are unfortunately seeing some communities, particularly the coal communities in Southwest Virginia, who are struggling because of the dependency on coal and what that has done to their local government budgets. So you really do always have to look ahead. You are in a region that has been historically dependent on the federal government. And while that may ultimately work its way out, it's a good time for you to be working through Fredericksburg Regional Alliance to step back and say, how do we diversify? How do we think differently about who we are and how we present ourselves to a commercial market as well as a federal market? So it's a good time to be here. Does anybody have any questions for Rob before I get into the second part of this presentation? We really do want it to be iterative. Okay. I'm going to touch just for a few minutes, and pardon my voice, it does not hurt me to talk, it hurts you to listen. Just bear with, that's my standard line, just bear with me. It does not hurt me to talk, I'm not contagious at all. So just bear with me. I have weird brain. I'm going to talk a little bit based on, now that you know what the market is delivering to us, which is really, economic development is all about knowing who's coming, who's going, what's that market telling us we need to do. What you're going to see up here now is where VEDP is headed based on our current, I'll use the term political, but I'll use it nicely, political environment. So every 4 years, our governor is new, and every 4 years, the governor has a different view, a different goal. This administration, and I can tell you I've worked for VEDP now for 21 years, and I've not had an administration who didn't build on the foundation of the previous administration. There is I think, very well-respected knowledge that you have to build on your assets, and there are some things that are logical for Virginia to continue to move forward. So this governor has done just that. Are any of you members of the Virginia Chamber of Commerce? Anybody here? Nobody's a member of the Virginia Chamber. Okay, Matt is. Okay. Speaking of which, let me introduce. Matt McLaren is here with us tonight. Matt is my manager who covers your region. He does a really good job for us here. He brings back a lot of information about you and who you are. So we're happy to have him with us and happy that he works well with Curry and the team. The Virginia Chamber, prior to McAuliffe's election in which Governor McAuliffe was elected, did an assessment of Virginia. They spent a lot of time, about a year, going out into the field, trying to understand what the business issues were. And they came back with, I'm not sure if this is the actual one, but they came back with a report. Here's what the Virginia Chamber's view is of where Virginia should spend some of its capital and its resources to improve our competitive position. Subsequently, in the first year of office, every Virginia governor has to produce an economic development strategy of his own. This governor produced one that we call the New Virginia Economy. It has 5 pillars, 5 table legs, if you will. The job of the agencies, including VEDP, is to understand where the administration's priorities are and determine how we can align our goals with those goals to the extent that we know 4 years from now, another governor may come in and slightly modify that. So we navigate a fairly interesting dynamic as we do this. But you'll see basically, as I said, from year to year to year, administration to administration, the principles remain the same. Keep a healthy business climate, build on your existing capabilities, invest in your workforce, and listen to the market. And those tend to be the standard policies that we are built on. I'm going to talk a little bit about the specifics that VEDP is doing within these 5 pillars from the New Virginia Economy. And I hope you can read this. If you can't, we have given Curry a copy, and you can have a copy of it. The first pillar was enhancing our infrastructure. And infrastructure in this administration means everything from roads to energy to oil, gas, anything that can help us be competitive in today's market from a physical infrastructure standpoint. What VEDP is proposing, what our agency proposes, is to focus on establishing and funding public-private site development. Now, why does this matter? We don't own sites. Rob told you, we do not own sites, we do not own buildings. But what we can do is help you understand what the market is telling us they want. How big of a building? How much land? What kind of infrastructure? Natural gas, roads, rail, what is it? We can give you that data so that as you think about the Fredericksburg region, you can think logically about where you might want to make investments, or where you might want to induce a private sector partner to make an investment in real estate that can then be marketed. The goal you're trying to achieve is having real estate under control with a guaranteed cost reduces risk for the client. If you don't reduce that risk, the client can find a piece of property somewhere else that's relatively proximate to where they need to be geographically. So investing in time and energy in understanding where your real estate product is located physically and how you can get that under control is something to pay attention to. Many rural communities in Virginia and in other states actually acquire property and develop it. Most of the urban areas and suburban areas either have full private sector partners nor do public-private investment. The locality may invest in the water and sewer, and the private sector invests in the land and the building. Whatever your strategy needs to be, find out what kind of companies are looking for what kind of real estate product, and then think through a regional strategy that probably has to be done at the local level, partnership, to make sure that you're competitive. If you're not competitive, we're not competitive. So we have a selfish motive here to be a cheerleader for you and to give you data to help you make good decisions. Growing our strategic sectors. So Virginia has always been highly diverse. You know this. And it's difficult to claim us as the state for bio like Maryland does, or to claim us as the Silicon Valley of the East Coast. Very difficult because we have a very diverse market base. However, there are some strategic sectors that we are going to focus on, and those include sectors that are of interest to you. Advanced manufacturing, information technology, cybersecurity, aerospace, modeling and simulation, international trade, interestingly enough, logistics. All of those are applicable to your region. The reason it matters to you that you understand who we want to grow is because when we are competing for projects in those sectors, we probably will be a little more aggressive as we understand those targets match up with your targets. So a company who's, the best example I can give you is Winchester, Frederick County, far northwestern Virginia. Historically very focused on logistics and advanced manufacturing. But they were not really interested in recruiting companies. They focus on existing business growth. However, they are well positioned because they are the northernmost point of, back then, the northernmost right to work state. Logistics companies wanted to go to their communities, to their city, county. They weren't really interested. They let the market drive that. What they wanted to focus on was advanced manufacturing, higher paying jobs, particularly for their existing businesses. To the extent that we can, in our art of doing the deal, remember what their goal was and how it aligned with ours, we can be more supportive. So I encourage you to think through which sectors you really want to go after. Not that you'd ever say no to anybody, although you might. We've seen that happen. But there are some that if we understand who you think is the best fit for you, we can be more supportive when we have that opportunity. Promoting our competitive business climate. The thing that we have been short on for 15 years, Rob, in terms of the image, 20 years, 15. We have $1 million budget for advertising. I dare say Fairfax County has more than we have. I dare say that. And if you listen to NPR, Fairfax County markets Virginia, and we're very grateful for that. In order to be promoting our competitive business climate, we've got to have dollars to develop an image, to take that message to the world. You know, because you're looking at your BlackBerries, how much noise, how much marketing comes across all the time. You have seen the commercials for Pure Michigan. You've seen the ads for Startup New York. Have you seen anything for Virginia? No. New York's is a $50 million campaign. That's more than 4 times our whole budget, okay? So this is an area of focus for us. We will be thinking through how we can start the process of creating an image by using business-led focus groups, take some small steps this year, and hope that as we demonstrate success, we can get the General Assembly to think about funding for giving us that bigger image. To have an image like Virginia is for lovers, internationally known, but Virginia is for business. We need that to be as well known. The other thing in this area that we really are focusing on is how do our regions, how are you positioning yourself? What's your message? And where can we build on that more effectively? We haven't always done a good job of seeing how you're positioning yourself and then taking that to market as well. And it's kind of complex to do it and yet have a clean and succinct Virginia message. So this is another area of focus for us. Fourth pillar, nurturing a sustainable environment. This is slightly out of VEDP's normal sweet spot. This has a lot to do with entrepreneurialism, things that CIT and our universities are traditionally pretty good at with tools. How do you take an entrepreneur who has a really great idea and help him establish his company and start to hire people? That's not an area that VEDP historically has been. We don't have the tools to do it, and we don't have really the capacity to manage it on that small scale at the local level. But the entrepreneurial environment has changed. It is now equally as important to be able to talk about your entrepreneurial climate to a major employer as it is simply to help that local entrepreneur. Our major employers want to know, where are the creative people in this community? What businesses are they starting? How can I connect to that small business where he might have a really great idea that could help my technology? So this whole concept of a life cycle of an ecosystem of business is something we have to pay attention to. VEDP has posited that our sweet spot here is what we call sustained growth companies. Companies who are revenue positive, $1 million or more, probably have had 3 to 5 years of sustained growth, two jobs here, 3 jobs here, probably in all sectors. And these companies have a track record of not being high flyers, not coming out of the gate and just rising to the top, but steady growth. These companies, when you do an analysis, are targets for other states. Other states come to them and say, hey, you've been growing down here in Fredericksburg. Just come on up to my place in Maryland. I'd love to have you. We have relatively few tools, relatively few programs to help those companies. So VEDP will spend this summer analyzing that segment of the market, looking at what other states do, and then determining how can we create a program that works well for sustainable companies. Most of the time, these people are not even going to Chamber of Commerce meetings. They're spending all their time in their business. And really, I'm from the government and here to help you, makes them go that way. But we are losing some of these homegrown headquarters, and we can't afford to do that in today's economy. So this will be an area that we work with our partners at the state level to determine how to implement it. And then last but not least, equipping Virginia's workforce. There's not a lot I can say about workforce that you haven't already heard. Workforce probably ranks 50% of the time at least as high on a company's evaluation of growth scale as real estate does. It is the talent that drives the company's competitive environment. It is the talent that keeps them competitive in the global market. Virginia has a workforce system that has excellent partners at the local level, excellent ingredients, Germanna Community College, our WIBs, our state universities, all are great partners, all are delivering talent to the marketplace. But there's not a cohesive Virginia workforce message, and there's not a way to measure, at the end of the day, have we successfully put these people to work in the companies that tell us they want to grow? Huge supposed shortage of electricians down in Mecklenburg County, Virginia. Huge shortage up in Northern Virginia. And we did a data analysis last week, and we found nearly 7,000 registered unemployed electricians in Virginia. There's a mismatch here somewhere. We've got to get past this. So Virginia's VEDP's role in this will be to take our Virginia Jobs Investment Program, which is a 50-year-old economic development program focused on subsidizing training. We're going to take that program and find a way to help that staff lead better workforce response teams with our community colleges and in some cases with our WIBs to serve our business clients. Liz's view, we have an 18-month window. We have a political will, we have a state leadership will at the community college and in the Virginia Workforce Board, and we have the opportunity to recreate a Virginia Jobs Investment Program to make it more seamless to deliver to our clients. What do you do at the local level? What does Curry and the team do at the regional level? What do we do at the state level? And if you have questions as we do this, please ask, because it does look like a complex economic development ecosystem, and who knows whose roles and responsibilities, and are y'all doing the same thing?
What's been the ROI on some of those state level advertising that you mentioned in New York?
That's a really good question, and I don't know that we have ever seen a true database analysis of it, but I'll turn to Rob on that.
Yeah, generally I'd concur, and I would say, like the New York one, it launched last year and it is in the formative stages, and I think it's like a 4-year campaign. So with respect to that one, the jury's out. I just know, the ad folks who put all these together, they measure impressions and all. You just really have to take some of that with a grain of salt, I believe. I think it's important. What we're beginning to do, well, I'm going to make this tie together, just trust me. As we begin to think about a branding strategy, we're going to start, number one, with research. And I suspect this is what some of these other states have done. We just haven't seen their work yet. But what we're going to do is go on the street for an RFP and get a good firm to lead us through this and get the best we can get, who will first poll existing C-level leaders all over the country for what their impressions are about Virginia. And I suspect, my hypothesis is it probably won't be terribly different than it was the last time we did this in 1999. That's how long it's been since we had money to do this. But they knew Virginia in a very positive way, but it was about history, mountains, and beaches, and less so Virginia as a place for enterprise and commerce. So the first thing to do is do this research, is do polling, and get a baseline impression on what they think about Virginia. And from an awareness and a business aggressiveness and all of those factors that to some degree play into these Forbes.com rankings and CNBC and all. That way you have a baseline of what they think, an attitudinal kind of thing. Then you do your program, whatever that may be, and it's largely digital. Yes, some of these folks are doing TV. We're getting pretty good results on digital media. It's a whole lot less expensive. We'll see what the mix turns out to be. And then you go back to those same people and survey them and say, well, have their impressions moved? Has the needle moved? To me, you start with awareness, and then I don't know that you necessarily would expect to get live prospects early on. You have to sort of soften the beaches and get the attitude and understanding of what you're doing first before some of those other metrics. I think it's a two-phase thing there, so it's early. But we're hoping to launch into a branding study this summer, and that's what Liz was referring to. These roles are fluid, and our job today is to begin thinking of you as appliers of WD-40 to these gears next year. Because if you get rust in here or somebody throws a stick into those gears, that thing's going to seize up. And it is so formidable out there in terms of the competition. It would be wonderful if the New Yorks and the Florida Enterprise Group is really ramping up. And the Gulf Coast states, they got all this federal money because of the disaster, the storms and the oil But that has given them new resources to plug into massive economic development programs that, just they, in some cases, can buy a project that we simply can't do or make it work on an ROI basis. So it's very formidable. All the competition is ramping up, and we need to do the same thing, but we want to do it in a fact-based way. So we all have roles and responsibilities, and I guess the first is the folks in this room. Let me just say, nobody has a greater appreciation for your trials and challenges and the pushes and pulls that you have as local elected officials and leaders and appointed folks. Believe me, we understand. And what folks are really looking for is leadership. Sometimes when it's not always the popular or maybe the easy thing to do. But it's like this lady with the baton. To me, the analogy is we're conducting a symphony. Everybody has a part, from the piccolo player to the viola player to the percussion. And the challenge is to keep it all honed together. If you haven't read the Cardinals report that Curry commissioned, there is a lot of wisdom in that report. But you know what? It's not flashy stuff. It's not revolutionary. It's back to the basics. Because of Curry's honor, Liz and I went to the Mediterranean Grill and both had curry tonight. But while we were sitting there,
And I won't eat this stuff.
consuming our curry, we were talking about it's really the blocking and tackling. This is not sexy work. It's not rocket science. But it is basic, it's fundamental, and it's important. And sometimes we get so caught up in the hype and the glitter and the Twitter and the techno stuff, we forget the fundamental basics. So I would urge you to underline, circle, question, debate if you have any questions about some of the wisdom that's put in that report. Because at the end, you have to be proactive and think of yourself as someone who might be investing. You're the person from Pennsylvania or Ohio looking at your community. Yes, you've got the greatest people in Virginia. Yes, it's a wonderful place to raise a family. Be able to prove it factually, with anecdote, with data, and stories that you can tell. One of the greatest examples, every time there's a new plant opens up somewhere in Virginia, it's not just here, but everywhere, all of a sudden, there'll be 500 people show up for 10 jobs. Those ratios, be able to talk about those ratios and the quality of the work, any measures of productivity that your plant managers see. If you go into those plants or facilities and they tell you, well, we've got 8 of these plants or facilities all over the country, and management in Chicago tells us we're the #1 most productive. Get those things listed. Know them. Put them in your inventory of sales stuff. So look at yourself as a business. It's hard to do, but it is so informative. Or get your neighboring community to be the prospect for you. And then you do the same thing. So the Fredericksburg folks go to Spotsylvania and pretend you're a prospect. Just play some of those games and learn about your community in different ways. Tell the story, be factual, be professional. Set the table. Anticipate the needs. So yes, it's labor. Liz hit on it. It's assumed in our site selection business when we get these consultants. And the best projects we have come to us from unnamed evil consultants in Chicago. But they're usually on the Fortune list. They want to know the data with precision. So it's I can beat that to it.
I'm going to jump in right
Yeah,
here.
please do.
Rob said they want to know the data. They already have the data. This is the difference in when I was local, or maybe even when Rob was local. When we were local, the companies would come to you and say, give me your data and help me understand it. Today they go on the internet, there are plenty of sources, and what these folks really want to do, they want to hear back from you at the Board of Supervisors level or at the Planning Commission level. They want to hear back from you the same story that they've already researched. And if there's a disconnect, then there's a lack of trust that starts right at the beginning. It's really scary because they can pick up a lot of data that doesn't tell your story. So figuring out at your local level how to have the data-based information told in a story on your website and your materials is really, really important today. We don't even know how many times Virginia is ruled out before we ever have a chance at a client because they've had an intern in their company do some type of research about Virginia. And maybe they picked up a news story, or maybe they picked up an inaccurate source. It's very, very important to have, I think, more and more statistics are available. Rob sent me something earlier today, a healthcare report on Virginia that's just come out. There are companies who will evaluate your workforce based on healthcare statistics. So if your communities happen to have a higher rate of obesity or a higher rate of heart disease, that can be a factor that companies consider because what does that mean to them? More costly insurance, okay? That's how detailed everything is getting now, and it's why it's so critical at the local level, not only to have your real estate strategy, which I do think is highly important, but your data, have that straight, and that's something you need to work with the regional group on as well.
And to that point, we're often eliminated from projects and we don't even know it. The companies looking online for data will mercilessly scratch us all. So one of the report points was to make sure the relevant data is readily apparent, that you're telling stories on your website. So that's going to be a going forward kind of to-do for the collective, all of us. And we'll certainly be part of that dialogue with you going forward. The other thing that I would urge you to think about, and is sort of baked in behind some of these bullets, so much we think about economic development as selling. Well, that's the impression that, unfortunately we've given the profession. Yeah, you're going to hire a person and that's all they do. Yes, you can't hide your light under a bushel basket. I grant you that. You need to be telling the story, and that was part of the report. But what are you selling? And it's really a place. Kerry introduced me, and he was more truthful than he would know. Yeah, I went to University of Richmond, liberal arts guy. I got my planning degree, and I've learned that the best planning is the foundation for economic development. Exciting, vibrant, appealing places. It's neighborhoods and housing and community amenities, all of that is, guess what? It makes you attractive to those millennials, the new folks that our great colleges like Mary Washington and Germanna are pumping out, that keep them here and attract others, because that workforce piece now and for the next 10, 15 years is going to be the differentiator for the companies you want your kids to work for. So it's about good zoning, innovative zoning, communities, neighborhoods, really new ways of thinking land use that create a neat place that makes you attractive, brings in the right kind of people that then in turn will attract the companies in the knowledge economy. And you saw how you're set up with professional and business services. That is your niche, a big part of your niche for this region. So as you think about your role, when you go to those planning commission meetings and you look at those zoning cases, that is part and parcel of your job as economic development leadership. So don't separate the two. We often do that. The planners and the economic developers are enemies and adversaries. They're in the same game together. Planning success will lead to economic development success. They were not always that way. Now they have to be co-joined that way, or you will not be successful. So that's sort of the local spiel. Any questions on the local side? Because we'll do a little bit on the region, but we can come back. Okay.
Yeah, I have one question for you.
Yes, sir.
On page 9 in the guidebook for local elected officials, talking
Yes.
about needs of business. And maybe because I'm in a uniform and not a suit, I kind of focus in that area.
Yes, sir.
And my career has been half in law enforcement and half in fire. But I've always thought, as one of the bullets here, that quality of life and not just selling a location, pushing that quality of life to the corporate realm, to the CEOs and the leadership of those corporations, the business, the millennials, as you said, on down, where they want to come and where they want to settle. How big would you say quality of life is the last bullet here? But how would you put quality of life?
Great question. I would tell you that when I started back right out of high school from Bedford with Curry, quality of life was just something you threw in there, because most of the hiring was local, and you bring in a few manager types, and I think it's sort of manufacturing branch plants. My view, certainly today is that quality of life is really, if it's listed as the last bullet, it probably shouldn't be. It's right up there because it gets to what I was doing a very poor job of saying. It's the place, the sense of place is important. And that quality of life, however folks may choose to define it, is what makes that appeal to the person who wants to stay here when they graduate or come here because of what you've got. Because of the knowledge-based economy, the need for talent, the struggle for talent. The companies are paying bonuses to get the right talent into the right places. You heard about the mismatches. My view is the quality of life has really radically risen in importance, and which is why I was sort of saying all this stuff we do with zoning and land use, green belts, bike trails, races, fitness, wellness, all of this. To me, that is, the scale has radically tipped. So it's hard to put a number on it because they'll be looking, the prospects and their consultants will be brutally merciless on dollars and cents issues, but behind it all, they are looking for workforce and the talent that lets them innovate, put a new product out quicker, faster, better, more responsive, and you do that with talent than their competition. So I think it's radically reversed from it was 15, 20 years ago, and it's vibrant and has to be considered very much in your planning broadly for economic development.
One little piece of that.
Yes, sir.
And where do you put services and quality of life?
Services.
Local services.
Okay, well, I would say, at the top of the list, healthcare. We are beginning to see folks wanting to know, and this is really one of my big concerns of Virginia, is sort of the non-metro versus metro. I'm really deeply worried that, broadly speaking, it's not just Virginia, it's America, that the hospitals, the doc in a box, the clinics, the healthcare wellness services are vital, again, to convince an employer who's not familiar or needs to expand that they can get that because they get the talent, they get the workforce they want. So, this study Liz mentioned at Arlington County is the healthiest county in Virginia. And frankly, most of Northern Virginia was rated pretty well. But you look at the map that came with this, and the southern tier of Virginia, kind of the southern Piedmont down along the North Carolina line and headed west, and some portions of like the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula and so forth, Eastern Shore, were looking at high rates of cardiovascular, diabetes, other issues like that. That's going to be a concern. That's a deep concern I have for the rest of the state. So there's just a general trend for urbanization, and that's where, just with economies of scale, those things tend to be. So that is a challenge for the state, who's trying to help those areas who don't show up as well. And it's a costly thing. It is a significant source of political tension, you know, when the folks do go to Richmond. So I think from that standpoint, this region is probably very well served with your medical and health services and similar attributes.
They will look at other services though, such as safety, security, if you want to call that a service. They will look at crime rates. They will look down at the neighborhood block and the surrounding areas for your commercial and industrial development. And I think, to Rob's point, I think it has risen up. What I would not encourage localities to do is focus solely on that without having thought about the labor and real estate first, because that's the prime driver. But because the data is becoming so relevant, when you do get to the quality of life aspect, it is different for every company. One company thinks it's safety, another company thinks it's a coffee shop. Okay, so you need to be able to think through from your, again, put your eyes on as a visitor, what matters to you in terms of quality of life, and how can you define it in your community. And I would also, in your region, this is where the regional group matters. Having a downtown like a Fredericksburg, matters to every one of your counties. Okay, you have to have that interaction of that urbanization with what you have as your assets in the counties.
I do want to make it clear that while I'm talking about things of quality of life as something that require more emphasis, there are a number of must-dos. And sometimes we tend to, as we all do, overlook some of those building blocks, those basics. Nothing I say should be construed to say you don't need adequate facilities, buildings, industrial, commercial parks. That is a given. And if you don't, all of the others just idle chat. Because at the end of the day, you have to have a solution that is real and timely and affordable for the prospects. The other things might, a great term we learned going through Rolls-Royce, that these consultants are looking for a curve of indifference. They'll look for 3 or 4 places that are basically the same. And if you can, and the site and the building is a commodity, it's a given. They assume that that is there in some form. It's the other things that will trip it from community A to community B, as long as you have the basics in place.
Why should I, at a local board of supervisors, city council, town council, pay for a local economic developer and pay for a regional economic developer? What in the world? Am I not duplicating services? No. Coming from a local background, I will tell you that my board of supervisors and my city council expected me to market my community. They did not care what was over in Brunswick, even if Brunswick had a great hospital. They didn't care what was up in Petersburg, even if Petersburg had great history. They didn't care that Lake Gaston was 30 minutes away. It was outside of my community, and Liz, you will not talk about anything outside of this community. That's what I learned when I was local. And it's appropriate, because my board of supervisors and my city council were beholden to their citizens. What the regional organization does for you is bring the labor market area that the business is thinking about to add to the story and complement the local story. So the regional group can have data and can provide a picture of assets that support your local community. And they can say it in a way that keeps the local economic developer clean and focused on his own territory. Now, it's not easy. To be a member of a regional group is not easy. Rob's point a while ago that much of economic development is blocking and tackling behind the scenes, not sexy, not pretty. Regionalism takes time, takes energy, and you can't tell your citizens what you're doing when you're doing it. It's hard. These kind of conversations are, though, important because at a local level, you won't have the opportunity, except for your existing businesses, you generally won't have the opportunity to recruit someone new if you haven't got a bigger voice in the market. That's the labor force market that the Fredericksburg Alliance represents. It's really critical to convene these kind of meetings. That's the other thing I think that a regional organization is exceptionally good at. Seeing regional trends, convening the right regional partners, solving issues at the regional level. Helping Germanna, helping Mary Washington understand how to service companies in all this footprint that they may not otherwise know have issues. Looking at supply chains within the region. Where are there opportunities to expand a company who may be landlocked in one community but could expand in the neighboring one? That's really hard for boards of supervisors and local economic developers to deal with, but regionals can help with that. So you do have to have, in my view, defined roles and responsibilities. You have to determine whether or not your region is a lead generator, a convener, a business retention group. When we have all kinds of Virginia that have different roles and responsibilities, you all with the Fredericksburg Alliance have to determine what this region's purpose is. But it is, in my view, critical to your success, and it is not a duplication of services. These show you regional marketing organizations in Virginia. Virginia is a unique state when it comes to the number and professionalism of these groups. There are 16 of them. They have different levels of staffing. They have different missions. They have different funding levels and funding structures. But all of them, when we are working with clients, bring knowledge, data, and new capabilities to the table that are really, really important. So I could spend 4 hours on a regional group. I did not have one when I was local, and I was weak because of it. And I really am pleased that Virginia has what I consider to be the nation's foremost economic development ecosystem because of this kind of work. Last but not least.
Great. And then it kind of rolls up back to the state. A couple of the roles that we have, I think, is to take what we learn from our various regions and roll it together. As Liz said, we have an enormously diversified economy, whether it's Hampton Roads, Southwest Virginia, the Piedmont region. It is all so different. Frankly, I think if there's a project that comes over the transom that we actually would want, that's environmentally clean and what have you, save for finding a site that is market ready, there's probably no project that we couldn't find a suitable fit for in the Commonwealth because of that diversity. That's a real strength that we have. It's just now we need to ramp up. We've only got about 4 or 5 sites of 200 acres or more that we could have construction ready in, say, 6 months in Virginia. We've been successful, but we've kind of absorbed property, stuff has rolled out. But if I said, we need to be putting steel up in 6 months, could we do it? We've only got about 4 or 5 places of that magnitude in Virginia that we could go to. So we're working on that. But taking that from an outreach standpoint, taking your unique assets, all 15, 16 regions on the map that she showed you, and pulling that together gives us a pretty formidable message that we can take out globally. And that's one role that we see ourselves, particularly once we get enough resources to really project that message through branding and advertising and what have you. We do think we are pretty good listeners. Particularly, Liz has a group of what we call our key accounts or our gold accounts that are, in effect, through working with regions, been sort of nominated as fundamental to our economy in Virginia. Each region has a number of these major players. We try to make sure we're listening to them on some regular basis. A lot of commonality on what is of interest to the CEOs and the business folks, so we're listening to that. So that's a role we can bring, and then from a policy standpoint, take that data to our governor and Secretary of Commerce, and hopefully if there are some policy solutions in the form of new statutes or new programs or new incentives, that can be informed by listening to these companies. We've got the governor's office on our speed dial. And I got to tell you, we got a very unique governor right now. And he's got a Rolodex of massive proportions and is not afraid to use it. And we've been working him to death and vice versa. I want you to know you're getting your money's worth out of him. But he and whatever governor it is, this is truly, I'm on governor number 8 that I'm training. So whatever governor it is, I started with Governor Bilal, who was awesome. But they can open doors that our best salespeople or our managers just can't. And then he can extend and push dialogue forward towards closure. That's working in teamwork as opposed to opposition. Really, really helps. And here's just something, a technique to think through. You might have a plant here that you're calling on, and maybe the headquarters of that plant is in Illinois somewhere. I keep picking on Chicago because a bunch of them are out there. If we're working our system of gears right, you're feeding us information on what your local plant manager's issues are, and he can become an advocate within that network of 6 or 8 plants around the country. If we know about a project opportunity, let us know, get Liz involved. We can then take our business attraction folks and make sure when the governor's flying around, we can call on the CEO wherever they may be. So we'll do a top-down and a bottom-up approach. So be thinking about opportunities within your businesses that might have out-of-state connections that we need to leverage to get that solution. Other state partners, whether it's our secretary in Commerce and Trade or other agencies like VEDP, transportation, what have you, it is not uncommon that we will take messages through our secretary to others and make, hopefully, the wheels of state bureaucracy work a bit more smoothly. Talked about the policy. We want to share what other communities and regions have done with you and vice versa. You know, every meeting is a new learning opportunity for us, and it gives us a chance to absorb and then reflect back to other places who might profit from your good practices and vice versa. So, you know, and at the end, we are good accountants and stewards that we're extracting maximum value from the limited funds they give us to do deals. But as I said, we're getting $9 back for every dollar we put in. We just need a little bit more ammo. I will tell you, we had success in the General Assembly in replenishing a good chunk of our Governor's Opportunity Fund this year. There was some mischief, and some of the money got lopped off the top. So, you know, on one hand, they giveth, and the other hand, they bestow it. You know, I don't know. So, but we do that, and that may be my last slide.
It is. We just, success.
So if all of us, all 133 counties and cities and the 15, 16 regions out there do our job right, we can add to this potpourri of logos of corporations that have either come to Virginia or expanded in Virginia. And just on this one, there was no planning to this. It was just a splatter of, you know, the last couple of years of some of the more interesting projects that we have. But you can just see these brand names. It's really cool to have those associated with Virginia. McKesson, Geico, I don't think Geico made it. General Electric, you know what that GE is? You know, it's not washing machines. It's cybersecurity. The corporate cybersecurity center for GE out of a national search picked Virginia. They could have put that anywhere. It's not serving other customers. It's their own corporation, cybersecurity, and they picked kind of the Richmond area. And so to me, to be able to tell stories like that to other investors in the same strategic sectors that we're working in gets attention. So you've got very compelling stories too that you can add. If you just made this a region, just think about the map you could put together, some of the labels.